Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us for today's installment of the 2021 Remy Model Training Series. My name is Dee Scott, Marketing Administrator here at Remy, and I have the pleasure of serving as your webinar host this afternoon. Our speakers today will be Remy analyst Haoji Iguan, Gaisha Blackshear, and Peng Chung Wu. Haoji Iguan is a Remy analyst who provides extensive research, data analysis, and model forecasting to several consulting projects with an emphasis on regional economic and fiscal impact analysis in tax policy and transportation industries. She also contributes to the development of Remy's model methodology, conducts econometric analysis to estimate model equations, updates regional economic forecasting data, and provides advisory services and technical support to our Remy model users across the globe. Ms. Guan holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Beijing Normal University and a master's degree in international economics and finance from Johns Hopkins University. Next, we have Ms. Gaisha Blackshear, who is a Remy business development analyst. She works to ensure Remy users are able to effectively incorporate our economic model into their organizations and support their economic modeling needs. Ms. Blackshear earned her bachelor's in economics from Spelman College and her master's in economics from Georgia State University. Finally, Peng Chung Wu is a Remy analyst who performs extensive research, data processing analysis, and simulation design support to our research and development department here at Remy. He also contributes to the research and development of Remy's new features, new models, and current data update system. Mr. Wu holds a bachelor's degree in energy and power engineering from Beijing Institute of Technology and a master's degree in data analytics engineering from Northeastern University. We are thrilled to have these team members join us today for our webinar presentation. Following the discussion, there will be an opportunity to have your questions answered. Please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A submission portal located on your screen to be answered later in the presentation by our speakers. For your convenience, all registrants for the webinar will receive access to the webinar slides and recording via follow-up email. The materials will also be made publicly available on our website tomorrow morning. Without further ado, I will hand it off to Haoji to begin today's presentation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Dee, for the introduction. And then I will get started. So here is the agenda for today. I will first briefly give an overview of Remy, and then Gaisha will introduce TaxGI and give a model demonstration. Next, Peng Chen will explain how SCI module works. Finally, there will be a Q&A session, and we will open to questions. As we know, Remy has 40 years history of rigorous academic research and software development. Remy modeling approach mainly have these four components shown in the blocks. The input-output captures industry structure and inter-industry relationships. It's based on the idea that any output requires a corresponding input. Such input can not only be raw materials and services from other industries, but also labor from households. General equilibrium assumes that the economy starts from an equilibrium position where supply and demand are balanced. When a policy change or economic shock is introduced, the model derives a solution by finding a new set of prices and allocation of goods and services, such that the economy is in an equilibrium again. And Remy parameters and results are determined using econometric and statistical method. Economic geography is the study of spatial variation of economic activities. Access to broader labor and commodity markets make clustered firms more competitive relative to firms in low-density economies, which enables them to capture market share and increase employment and output. So these four components make up the integrated Remy economic modeling approach. When building a model, the first thing Remy does is to define the model regions. Remy can break regions down to county level or equivalent statistical unit. Model region can also consist of a connection of counties, such as an MSA or a state, or any combination of subnational areas. For example, when building the Alaska model, the 29 boroughs and the census areas in the state of Alaska are grouped into 6 economic regions. The region can cross state borders, and within a model, we can build multiple regions that are customized by needs. Before introducing how a Remy model works, let's review the concepts of static models versus dynamic models. In static model, the time factor is not explicitly taken into account. For example, the static model on the left chart explains only the final state of equilibrium. It does not show how this new equilibrium has been reached over time. The dynamic model, however, has the ability to estimate the compounding effect of a one-time shock over years. For example, the right chart shows clearly how total employment changes over years before reaching to an equilibrium. In real economy, as we know, there are lots of dynamics, so we need dynamic model for forecast and simulations. And this chart shows how Remy dynamic models work. First, we use control forecasts as the baseline. The baseline forecasts are calculated using various economic and demographic data sources. Then we input a policy variable associated with a policy change and run the simulation to get an alternative forecast. Finally, we compare the differences between these two forecasts to analyze the impacts of the policy change. And at this point, I will pass it over to Gaisha to introduce the tax PI and also give a model demonstration. Gaisha?
Thank you so much, Hao-Jae, for giving us context behind the Remy model. And so, as she said, I will continue to explain to you all what exactly tax PI is. And then so, we're going to first start with giving you all a background into what's up under the hood of the tax PI model. So the basis of this model is to enable our users, whether you are a revenue analysis organization or either state or local government, but it gives you the tools to analyze tax policy changes, whether that is residential, sales, income tax, or corporate taxes, in order to evaluate the different economic effects as well as fiscal impacts. And as Peng Chong is going to explain later, the socio-economic impacts of these changes as well. And so, with that being said, the next part of this is going to be a tax PI model demonstration. And then so, for the tax PI model demonstration, we decided to choose a decrease in personal taxes, well, to model a decrease in personal taxes after we first create the most critical component, which is the budget. And the reason why we chose to model the decrease in personal taxes is because it's a very current policy issue in which that we are seeing, especially with Biden proposing that wealthier individuals are going to receive hefty tax cuts within his Build Back Better plan, and as well as we could, and then as well as determining the effects of people who received tax benefits of those who earned under $75,000 a year. And so we just decided to model something that was very relevant to today's world. And with that being said, we're gonna hop right into the model. All right. And so, as you all can see, when you enter into any of our suite of products, you're going to immediately be greeted with this nicely tiled layout. So in tax PI, knowing each function of these particular boxes are very important because it's going to determine whether or not you're able to reap the full benefits of this particular product. So just for a brief overview before we go into creating the budget, which is the heartbeat of this particular model. we first have our regional and national forecast, which is going to allow for you to evaluate your baseline where you are without any type of policy shocks in which that you would employ within the model. And then the next, the next two buttons are going to be your regional as well as national control. These become very critical in this particular product being tax PI, because this is how you are going to attach your budget to your particular region. And then the last portion of this is going to be your regional and national simulation, which allows for you to create different policy environments with your policy variables. And so with that being said, we're going to transition into the budgets. So the budgets, so the budgets option allows for our users to have a significant amount of calibration. And so typically, the way in which that you begin is that you choose add new budget here. However, for the sake of this particular tutorial, we already have the budgets ready for you all. And so just to give you as well as some context of this particular model, this is going to be Oregon single region model, which just means that it is the aggregate numbers for the entire state with 70 industry regions. I'm sorry, like with 70 industry sectors. And so with that being said, we're just going to click on our detailed budget here. And so I'm just going to go over some of the critical features in which that in which the user should pay attention to, especially like, you know, when they're using their budgets, and as well as transporting them from Excel into the Remy model. And then so with this being said, the first screen in which that you're going to be presented with when you're creating a new budget is going to be the options. And then so this is going to allow for you to choose your fiscal year and as well as how you like to define your units. So as you can see, either you can do it by units, thousands, millions, or billions. And then the next step of this process is going to be actually building the different appropriation lines within the budget. So for for your budget, you're going to have space for revenues and as well as expenditures. And you can also input your data from your budgets as far back as 2001 and as well as far as 2060, like if you have those forecasted numbers available for you. And then in addition to this, in order for you to build upon your budget for both expenditures and revenues, you are going to have this option to add to your particular budget lines. And then so just for an example, let's say if we wanted to throw in another appropriation line for this budget, what we simply do is go here to add revenue. And then so as you all can see, is that it's going to let me rename this particular line. So let's say hypothetically we wanted to do a tax on manufacturers or something like that. So we can do a manufacturer's tax. And depending upon if you have the numbers available, you can either type these in manually, and you also have the choice to copy and paste these from Excel as well. But hypothetically, we're just going to put in some random number. So we'll just put 789,456. Then it was 987,456. But from here, our job does not stop, because the primary function of these particular lines is the fact that we have to, the primary function of these particular lines is going to be determined how we attach them to policy indicators and as well as policy variables. And the way in which that we do this is by clicking this pencil button here. And then so this is going to give us this screen. And so the first thing in which we're going to be presented with is the budget data again. And then the next option is going to be our indicator. And so for our indicator, this is going to determine the growth rate of this particular line item. And so for our economic indicators, we can base this upon a variety of factors. So we can do this by demand, output, value add, depending upon what type of taxes in which that you may be working with, personal income, property income, the list of assumptions in which that you could possibly apply to this particular model is endless. But for the sake of this particular presentation, we're just going to use output here. And then so for output, by doing this, we have the option to determine the spreading weights of each particular industry in which that we like to include within this tax. So for example, since we did a hypothetical manufacturer's tax, we can actually zero out everything else. So that would mean that we could take our we could highlight everything from forestry to construction, right click it here, use our calculator function, or you could do this manually if you decide to, and we can zero out everything in which that we prefer not to include. And of course, since we have a host of manufacturers listed here, we could also do the rest as well. But for the sake of this presentation, we're actually going to delete the budget line. So, so this won't be as imperative as, or rather, like this step won't be as imperative here compared to like when you're actually doing it. And then so with that being said, for your indicators options, you also have a variety of other things in which you could explore depending upon how customized it has to be to your needs. So this includes in adjusting your averaging weights, fixed amounts, and as well as the relationships and the projections. And then so now we're going to transition to our policy variable in which that we would attach to this. So again, the same thing with your indicators. You can also choose how you like for this particular budget line item to interact within your model. So since we're dealing with the manufacturer's tax, for this particular scenario, we most likely attach it to production costs. And then again, we could go through our spreading weights and change those according to how we desire. And then after all this is done, it's very important that we also press this save button. So we're going to do that. And now we officially have a fully functioning budget line item. But since this was just a hypothetical budget line item, we're actually just going to delete it, which is another function that comes in handy. And then so the rest of the items within these particular tabs found up here can be customized to your needs as well, including the feedback and aggregations. And the aggregations especially becomes handy if your budget has multiple categories or if it's quite lengthy. And then so with that being said, we're just gonna save this. Just gonna exit. Then we'll update our forecast later. And so the next thing, the next critical step of this particular, the next critical step after you build your budget is attaching it to the region. And this step is most forgotten the most because usually people are just like, okay, I have my budget, now I'm just gonna go run my simulation. But first you have to attach it to your regional control, because this is going to give you the fiscal impact analysis results in which that you desire. And so the best way to avoid any mistakes or thinking that your tax PI model is dysfunctional or something like that is to go back to the home page here and to click on your new regional control. And then so what this is going to present you with the same options as within like most of the same options in which that you would have for your policy simulation. However, for but for including your budgets, this is going to be most critical that you skip the inputs list, and as well so you'll skip your select inputs and as well as inputs list and go directly to your forecast options. And the reason why you are skipping your select inputs and inputs list is just so you're only attaching this particular facet, which is going to be your budget, to your regional control. So it is only going to add on the fiscal components and not everything else in which that you may be curious about the result of. So, and then with that being said, we are just going to add our budget here. And so you know you've come to the right place when you have this particular option. And then so since we just viewed our detailed budget, we're just going to click it. And this is also a very important step to remember as well, which is our balanced budget feedback option. We usually recommend that this is unchecked because most states do not require this particular step. But however, its function is basically to ensure that your budget is being ran however many times in which that you like. As you all can see that the default number is 5, but it's going to give you better results than just running it once, which is our default setting, or rather like when you uncheck the balanced budget feedback, is only going to give you the result of just the budget being ran once. And then so with that being said, another critical step here is to, the advice in which I would give is to leave this where I let your run years until 2060, because once you attach this particular budget to your regional control, and let's say if you just ran it all the way until 2040, you can no longer change it when it's time for you to create a new policy simulation. So we're just going to keep this at 2060, and we're just going to run the forecast now. And it takes us about a quick second. And so, as you all can see, that right now we are presented with our key results, which includes our economic summary with employment demographics. But however, we aren't going to get into the weeds with these particular features, because right now we're only viewing our baselines fiscal projections. And then so with that being said, from your key results, you're just going to go down to our tax PI tab, click here, and we're able to see our budget. And then so one thing in which I did want to emphasize is that in this particular step is that since we have no comparisons, or rather like this is not our policy simulation, everything is going to be in the levels comparison type. And then so with that being said, we are able to get a snapshot of our budget here to see how will things weather without any policy shocks? And then so this is strictly coming from the baseline. And of course, we can explore these, we can explore revenues and as well, we can explore what's driving revenues and as well as expenditures individually. But it seems as if that Oregon is actually going to have a budget surplus. And so we can see what's driving this. So from our revenues, we see that the primary thing that is raking in the most money for Oregon is going to be individual income taxes. And then as far as expenditures, the greatest spending is going to be made within human services for now, without any shocks. And then so now we're going to transition to our policy simulation. But in the meantime, it's also very important that we save our regional control that has our budget attached to it. And so you're just going to go over here in the corner and click your Save Forecast. And so we'll just say regional forecast with the budget. And so now we can safely click out of this, knowing that we do have the fiscal like impact components attached to our particular region now. And so now we can actually go over here to our forecast and we can click on our most recent regional control with the budget. And now it is safe to do a simulation. And so we're gonna click on our new simulation button. And then we're gonna be presented with this screen. And as you all can see, Remy has a ton of features in helping you build your particular policy scenarios and as well as a lot of directionality. But for this particular tutorial, we're going to go to our full list feature. And then we're going to type in personal taxes here. And so we get not only a definition, but as well as a deeper understanding of the different connections in which that this particular variable has within the model. So we're just going to name this decrease in personal taxes. And now we're going to press select. And then so for our details for our region is going to be Oregon. Then for our particular units, we're going to do nominal. And then we're going to go with millions for today. And so we're going to forecast a hypothetical change in personal taxes. And let's say we're going to say that each year Oregon's government collected less than 100 million. And so we're going to see how these things affect the economy. And then we're just going to do that from 2021 until 2060. All right. And so now we have our inputs ready. And then I would go here to forecast options. And so as you all can see, we have our detailed budget attached. And now we're just going to run our forecast and see our results. And then so as we can see is that first we're presented with some sort of expected economic results. So as we can see that with the change in personal taxes, this created an increase in disposable personal income, and as well as an increase in consumption, and as well as overall aggregate demand. But for the sake of this particular presentation, we're going to just be evaluating the fiscal impacts of these particular like economic changes. And so with that being said, we're going to go straight into our tax PI results. And so, but I did want to mention that if you all wanted to delve deeper into all things involving your population and total employment, there is a diverse range of tools from your analytical graphs, economic tables, and demographic tables. So now, as far as our budget, with a decrease in $100 million in personal taxes per year, we're able to see that up until approximately 2024, Oregon actually ran a budget surplus. However, they had a prolonged budget deficit until the year, seems like 2050. And then so that's one of the primary functions of this particular model, is the fact that it gives policymakers, and as well as, I mean, especially those who deal with budgets and things, the ability to predict and prevent potential budget budget shortfalls, and as well as to take advantage of potential surpluses. So, but I think that also an interesting aspect of this is to see what exactly would be driving the revenues for this particular, for this particular policy simulation. And so from here, we can go over here to revenues, and we'll just click to see. And then so as we can see, individual income taxes still took up a bulk of the load. And then for expenditures, it tells a bit of a different story. It seems like, because at first we had education taking up a bulk of the spending, but that soon progressed to being primarily human services. And then I did want to emphasize that the comparison type within all of these particular graphs and as well as tables is going to be with differences. So this is going to be evaluating how much in which that these changes were impacted from the baseline or the delta. So, and with that being said, that is a very brief overview of the tax PI simulation. And so now I will be handing off the next part of this presentation to Peng.
Thank you, Raisha, for giving us such a wonderful demonstration. So next, we will take a look at the new feature in this year's REMI model, the socio-economic indicators. So we know people nowadays talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion a lot. Undoubtedly, this concept plays an important role in our daily economy. It is because every decision that we make about public policy changes is a product of winning and coordination among all parties. Different stakeholders usually represent different aspects of the economy, and it's a trade-off to balance benefits for each side and achieve the maximum of the superiority of tax policies. So voices from different sides should be heard when we analyze economy, especially tax policies. Besides, the current wealth and income in our economic system is distributed differently among different race, gender, geography, and education groups. American demography is also changing all the time. Therefore, building a diverse workforce is imperative for future taxes development and economic growth. We may have some questions about how will public policy changes affect those people from various backgrounds. So Remy's SEI is a solution to answer these questions. So here we listed the measurements of Remy SEI modules. It allows users to observe results including compensation distribution, employment changes by earning quintiles, a consumption price by earning quintiles and range, inequality coefficients, employment by race and gender, employment by educational attainment, labor force participation by race, gender, unemployment, and also per capita income. So now we are going to do a quick SEI demonstration. And still using the same example. Let's see what we can find from the demonstration. So here in the weighted compensation rate chart, we can see it causes the increment of all industries' compensation rate in general. And at the beginning, the personal taxes change affects middle 20% industries the most, and affects highest 20% industries the least. Then with changes over time, the compensation rate increase on middle 20% industries gradually goes down, and the lowest 20% industries and the second 20% industries start to have the highest increase percent change. In the chart of employment by industry quintiles, we can detect some similar employment patterns. So this can be explained by the phenomenon that high compensation rate and more employment opportunities often happen at the same time. For employment by race, we can see here a lower personal tax bring more employment for all races. And during the first few years, the increasing ratios are close among Black, non-Hispanic, other non-Hispanic, and Hispanic people. And after that, Hispanic people employment increase start to slow down a little bit, while Black people and other non-Hispanic people, their employment increasing rate stay at the same level for a couple of years before going down. And another interesting chart I can show is the employment by education. So here, this chart we can find, it indicates for year 2022, the total amount of new employment opportunities added, and more than 70% of the new opportunities are for those people without a bachelor's degree. So this can be very helpful information when we evaluate how public policy alter our social structure. So yeah, this is I see a demonstration for today.